All right, this is going to be like a director's commentary. This is the Edelweiss mural that I did recently in the spring and early summer in Golden, BC. Okay, the diagonal on this is 56 inches diagonal, like that. 56 inches. Let's just see. 56 inches, which is also what I got over here. No, that's not right. 72 inches. That's the vertical height. All right, welcome to another Haltz Art video. I've put together a compilation of videos I made of a mural in Golden, BC. This is the drive I did regularly to go from where I live, Windermere Lake, to Golden, BC. And as you can see, this is like very early spring. There isn't even any buds, just a little bit of buds right now, so no green. Just kind of take note of that. My goal was to basically finish this mural by the time the snow melted. So looking up to the hill there's Edelweiss, and just a quick trip up there, and boom, there I am. First thing I did was clean the wall. It's called etching, and so I just used this etching solution. Not that I think it's muriatic acid. I didn't use that. I used like a more kind of gentler approach. Cleaning the wall. And then the next step was going to be priming these blocks. And there's about 38 or 39 blocks in total. Maybe a little bit more, maybe around 40. So yeah, it was an interesting kind of layout. As you can see, they're kind of like Lego blocks. So yeah, the goal here was just to get them nice and clean as best as I could. With these types of blocks, you know, they're not the easiest to paint, but I got a decent amount of primer on there on this day, and didn't quite get the whole wall done, but pretty darn close. All right, so I started with that first square there. Bit of a slow push today, but did make some ground on some priming after the cleaning. So here is some examples of drawings I made for Edelweiss. These were the initial concept drawings, really quick sketches. Here you'll see kind of the idea for the D being an embroidered kind of look, and then the A was going to have a figure inside. This was the first sketch I did, I believe, with their logo above, just brainstorming. And then I put together this kind of vision mood board and sent it to the client so they could see kind of the direction I'd be going. And then taking one of the initial sketches and putting it on a photo that was sent to me of the wall. Still hadn't seen it yet. So here you'll see the Photoshop version of the letters. So I made them a little bit more blocky, and then put some of the artworks in throughout the letters just to see how that was going to look possibly, and then kind of use that as my template. Here's some examples, 3 different examples, 2 with a design concept on them, and then the kind of raw wall. It was a curved wall too, so that was a little bit of a added bonus in terms of complexity. So there's the Edelweiss, and then I like to take the actual font and then see how much area that covers, so I could wrap my brain around the amount of paint I would need. And then here's some of the close-ups of each letter initially in the concept rendering phase. And then I can also look at the blacks and see how much of the color black I would need. I was going to do some rolling, and just give me an idea of how much paint to buy, just to help with the budget, stay within budget somewhat. Of course, that's always the goal. Okay, I'm just going to start out and say that this is a very cool project I got to work on that almost didn't happen. Initially, Edelweiss had contacted me, and I didn't actually see the email, so Fast forward to like 6 months later, and I responded to this email, and they were looking to see if I was interested in doing a mural, and got back to them and said, if you're still interested, I'm very keen to do a mural. And so after a little bit of back and forth, they sent me a bunch of information on Edelweiss, the Swiss village. And it turns out that CPR Rail basically brought the Swiss guides over to Canada in order to help them get the tourism industry going, and worked with CPR. So they came, and then they were missing their families. So CPR built these houses so that their families could come over and live there. And so Golden down below, up on the ridge, Edelweiss. So they were a little bit of ways away from the community. It would have been, pretty interesting times. And so I was trying to think about these things while I was working on the designing and coming up with the ideas for the mural. And you'll see here a bunch of drawings I did, basically doing a bunch of prep stuff for the mural, basically lifting the weights. In the studio, getting all the drawings done, making cutouts, making stencils. Even on the wall, I made like a grid of the blocks just to see how the artwork would all fit in there. And then also I ordered my paints, and then put together some of my older paints, but mostly ordered fresh paints for the job so that I had the right amount and even a little bit extra in some cases, just so I could basically pull off all the artwork that I wanted to, and then have a little bit of extra options to play with. Spray paint was the right choice, as I was going to do both freehand, use cut tools, and also use stencils. So you get such a wide array of colors with spray paint now, and the paint quality, the pressure, there's different types of pressure and stuff. So it really, this part in the studio, doing all the planning, sets the tone for the whole rest of the mural. It's really how I like to work. It gives me a guide to follow, and then I'm ready to take on the job. Even though there's going to be surprises that might come up, I'm going to be ready and have most of my materials I need to make the magic happen. So that's basically how I like to roll. I was always driving like alongside the trains. Coming into Golden, there's a huge train yard there, the CPKC rail. So it pretty much felt like I was just completely immersed in this process. Every moment just felt right. And that's what made this really special to me, because when that happens, things are going to click really well. And obviously there's always going to be some surprises here and there, but overall it just started out with a bang, and I was just really stoked about that. And I kind of felt like these Swiss guides were, kind of there with me, giving me the thumbs up. And, that's the way I kind of envisioned it anyway. So here's a night I went out with my projector and just did a little bit of projecting on the wall for the S. It ended up not really working out very well because the wall was quite textured, but at least I could kind of get the drawings on there, and then I could see how it was going to possibly look. And then once you start painting them, that's when the paint takes over anyway. So it's like a different language. And so I like to use drawing and painting together. I just think, they're kind of a married couple in a way. So that's pretty much how I like to do it. So yeah, I just did this projection on the white wall while I had it just that night. And then next day, right back to it. Just kept on hashing out the letters, getting the forms, and then going back and working on the details in certain letters, and then building the S's. This is after projecting the night before, and then starting to get those kind of hashed out, and then starting to put in my figures for the first letter, which was the E. And it just, like I said, it went off really well. Started out on the right note, and it set the tone for the rest of the mural, which I was super grateful for, and just honestly super grateful to be at Edelweiss doing this, because there is a lot of people that were actually paying attention to what I was doing there, and they would come talk to me in some cases, and sometimes they had very honest, I don't want to say feedback, but just interesting, honest communication between each other. And so I just feel like as an artist, it's easy to get all uppity up about that, or just respond with the art. And I think that's one of the cool things about art, is that it can speak for itself, but it's also very much open to interpretation. And it might depend on what you know, or what I know, or what my experience is, or what your experience is. And it stays open to that, which is pretty cool. So here I'm just working on some stencils. I like to make stencils. I like cutting them out. I like drawing them. I like figuring out the shapes. I mean, this one's pretty intricate, right? There's a lot of little pieces there. So that was going to be for the patch on the D. You can kind of see it there. It's going to be an Edelweiss flower, and it's made to look like it's thread. So it was quite intricate, and that's why I went with the stencil, because of how intricate it really was, and I wanted it to look kind of sharp. But then, using spray paint and different nibs and can control, I can really kind of control the paint so that it, it just does magical things when you're able to have some good can control, is what I'm trying to say. And that just takes time to learn and keep doing it. Here's some drawings I made. They were like kind of the forms I find as I'm working on these murals, and I'm working on the different parts of it. For the stencils, I can start to see shapes that are going to work for me, like for highlights or shadows, or making it look like thread, basically. And then you can see the nibs there. Different types of nibs. I used whole bunch, blue, yellow, green, you name it. I did a lot of kind of experimenting, which was super fun. And but yeah, so the stencils really, I was really stoked on, and I put a lot of work into them, so that on the day when I'm painting, I have them at my disposal. I can use them, or I don't have to use them. Sometimes I use parts of them, sometimes I use all of them, and I also use both the positive and negative portions of the stencil. So this allows me to create pretty amazing results that I think have my own style and my own kind of vocabulary and dialect, let's say dialect, because art is like a language, and then the way that I'm trying to express it is kind of my dialect. And I am 100% honest. I'm not from Switzerland. I'm not Swiss as far as I know. I do have European roots, so I get it a little bit. And then I've also been very lucky in my life to go to some places through some other work that was run by a Swiss fellow named Rudy. And it was this mountain hut. We went up by helicopters. This is like 15, 20 years ago. And it was my first time in a helicopter, got in this helicopter, and he like banked this hard turn, and we had to land and get all the stuff out. And yeah, it was pretty wild. So that was my first encounter with Swiss culture, and I didn't really know at the time the history behind it. So, on this mural, flash forward to now, or, just recently, and I'm really trying to put that into it, like that awe factor, like, wow, these people came to Canada by themselves via CPR rail, who built them this village, brought their families over, lived there, and in a place where it was, English wasn't their first language, new territory. They were kind of up on this ridge, so they weren't really in town. So, there was children. It would have been challenging, and I think you think of those times too. I just look at the way these guys climb these mountains. It was like, wow, like look at the clothing. They're not wearing Arc'teryx. They're just wearing, some of them were wearing like suits going up the mountains. And basically would have ropes tied around each other, not like these fancy ropes they have today. And don't get me wrong, I mean, that's the evolution. That's a beautiful thing. But it's just really cool that look at the backpack. It's not a fancy backpack. And yet they went up Mount Assiniboine. Like, that's phenomenal, in my opinion. So you can see the E and the D there. I just was so stoked on that. Just going to say that right now. The Switzerland patch really coming together. And this is the Swiss canton flag for Bern. Okay, so Bern is a canton of Switzerland. I think it's like a province. I was learning on the go a little bit, and then people were stopping to talk to me. Some of them were actually from Switzerland, as it turns out, and so they would give me some information. And that is like really, to me, the best way to make a mural. Like, I like to do it that way. Mural calls, for instance, they're a little bit, I feel like, more rigid, and they don't give you that flexibility. Whereas this project, it was just like it just came together kind of organically, and it felt really good to be there. So I just knew it was the right fit. And the group that I was working with, the client and all the people working there, were pretty stellar. And just the environment, the mountainside. And then as I'm working on this, I'm thinking about the history and just letting it kind of, it just would get me pretty stoked, to say the least. So here is the L. And I guess I had the design as you could see earlier, but I did do some freestyling on it, which is, again, that flexibility. And then I put that Swiss emblem in there. Originally, I was going to put a bighorn sheep. I was going to put something else. And then I said, well, bighorn sheep are amazing, but I'm going to put some mountain goats on the W, because these mountain goats would have been witness to these Swiss guides and their families in some cases if they went up there. Or they can't, obviously the goats come down below as well, so they would have seen them, and I just think that's amazing. So the goats, they got to go on the top of the W. And I think the W, in my opinion, was my personal favorite. And it was a couple other people that were walking by. They loved the W as well, which, like, that strikes a chord, and that you're on the right path. It's not about getting someone's, like, validation for what you're doing, but it just kind of shows you're on the right path. It's like a messenger in a way, and I think there's a lot of messengers when it comes to making art. And if you listen to them, that's something they can't teach you in school, but you will learn that in the process of making these, whether it's a mural or a painting or whatever it is, music, I mean, whatever it might be. A little tongue-in-cheek, decided to put the corkscrew in there on the L, Swiss Army knife. Maybe that's cheesy, but I thought it was kind of funny. And, we always need a corkscrew for something, so I just thought it was fitting to put it in there. The scenery of where I live is epic. I'm just going to say that right now. And I try to imagine also how these people back in the day would have witnessed this place, with maybe a few less humans out here. And just to imagine what that would have felt like, I don't know. But while I was there at Edelweiss, I was like feeling it, because it's just up on the ridge there. It's like you're in a different world, even though it's like modern day down below. There's the Trans-Canada Highway. There's things going on. You just kind of disappear up there into this world. And I think that's what's so cool about this place. And yeah, that really, I think that spoke to me, and definitely, like, this fire gave me the fuel, or the fire. This is the drive, my not daily commute, but I did it once in a while, following the trains, and then boom, right onto the wall, and it's like just the flow of that transition from driving and then onto the wall, and then absorbing all of those things, those moments, and then really channeling that through the work, Here I'm working on it's like a Swiss pin emblem for the guides. It says like guide diplomat. Obviously I couldn't get that all in, and then there's like an axe there's a climbing axe and then an actual axe and some ropes. And then it says SAR at the bottom. So it's a pin that the guides would have worn around that period. And then in fact, when I looked at the photos, I did see them wearing that pin. So I was like, nice. Because when you're researching, history is a funny thing, as we all know. So you never know if you're getting the full story or what's all there, right? So I did quite a bit of research on this project, and I think that really paid off for me because it gave me plenty of material to work with. Like I had to actually rein it in a little bit because I had a lot of ideas. This was me pretending to be, well, I have snowboarded, but I was doing a pose so I could use that to paint the snowboarder in one of my S's. And sometimes that's what you got to do. You got to pose for the art. I can't always get a model or, finding them online. It's not too bad. Like there's some cases here. I found some stuff online, and then most of it is, like also putting me into it, and not because I wanted me to be in it, but I just needed a really clear picture of a snowboarder carving up the side of a mountain. So that's why I chose to do that. And I think it worked out nicely. This is the W, and this was an exciting one because basically I was painting the mountain behind me. And before I even say that, I was wondering, what am I going to put in the background here on this W? Because I had like this kind of like spirit looking guy standing on a precipice rock, looking in the foreground, kind of like ghostly, the spirit of the guides, and then the mountain in the background. And I was like, what mountain? And I'm like, dude, turn around. There's a mountain right behind you in the name of Kicking Horse. So I was, pulling the 180 and then trying to figure out which was left and right and then paint it. So it was basically like plein air painting with spray paint, which I don't know is a thing yet, but it should be. So yeah, I was really stoked on how the W came together. It was just a lot of fun. I even looked at a tree behind me that was swaying in the wind and put that into the foreground. And it just was mostly freehand, so I wasn't using stencils in this case, which was super sweet, except for the guy, the little figure I was going to put in. I wanted him to be super sharp. So I did draw him out and made him into a stencil and then put him on the rock precipice. Precipice, my favorite word. And so he would be standing in the foreground, kind of like, a spirit would, and kind of misty around him, all mysterious. And yeah, so as you can see, there he is there. That's the paper version. So you can kind of see how I do it. I get the guy in there where I want him to be, and then I paint him in. So it's all part of the process. So then I kind of go back and start working on some of the letters I'd already been working on, and then doing more detail into them, adding more definition, sharpening up the edges, cleaning things up, making it presentable. And then here's the eye. It's like an Edelweiss flower, which is a super cool flower. It's kind of soft and furry, with these little like globe-like centerpieces, and it's all fuzzy and nice. And then I did kind of the Matterhorn in the background. And then on the top of the eye is like this geometric pattern, which is the modern logo of Edelweiss Village. And I was really happy with how that worked out. I had to kind of figure out, how am I going to do this, like in certain parts, like how to keep it clean. A lot of finger muscle control and can control, and just, playing with the wind a little bit so that it would go in the right direction, the paint that is. And then the E was interesting because up until the W, which I'd been stressing about, and then look at how it worked out, I was like, wow, like don't stress out. It's not worth it. And so I went to the coffee shop and was talking to them, a couple there who were actually from Golden, one of them born and raised Golden person, Goldenite. I don't know what I'll have to ask them next time. And I was like, I was telling them, like, I don't want to paint the train because there's already a mural in town that has a train that I love. I think it's a great mural, and I just respect the artist. So how can I put a Swiss person into this scenario? And he's like, well, they probably would have helped survey. And so I looked it up, and sure enough, the Swiss guides did help CPR do a lot of surveying. And so they would have used an instrument like this, which, again, for me, I love film and video and movies, and I worked in the movie industry for a little while. So again, it was like this connection to it, because I'm looking at this guy looking through this instrument, and it just made me think of all the directors, or even myself, and I'm looking through the camera, or all the directors I've worked with, or DP guys, you know, like the classic looking through the lens and through the viewfinder. Anyway, I've always loved that imagery of someone looking through, because it really is like you don't know what it means. You know, it's like they're looking into the future in a way, right? And I don't know. So that I owe to this awesome couple I met in Golden at the coffee shop, and much appreciated. That was super cool. Great little coffee shop too, with some very delicious donuts. Ethos was the name. Super cool place. So yeah, I went up and ended up, that ended up being the E, and so I hope that I know that couple will go up there, and I hope they, I can just see them smiling, because it was a great idea. And so that's, again, working with the community to bring them into the mural, or just, it wasn't even like trying to make that happen. You can't script those things. It just happened, right? And that's what I love about murals, especially because they're public pieces in most cases. Sometimes they're private, but this is a public piece. So to have the public involved in the process, it's a win-win thing to do. I don't know. I mean, it's just a great way to work. And then it's a little bit, it just really tells a unique story that is very specific to this place. And it's kind of true to the story, because it uses history, books, museum information, but also people who live there. And some of the people were family members or related to the family in some way. Or the one guy came up and he literally built this wall and was like stoked that I was painting on it. He was asking me how it was to paint on the concrete. And I was like, well, it's a tricky thing, painting on concrete, because you want to make sure that it sticks. That's the goal. So I tried by cleaning it as much as I could and putting the primer on really well and letting that cure properly, not rushing the process, not rushing the technique. So at this point, I'm just going through the whole mural and really just tightening things up. I'm adding a lot of color into the shadow areas of the block letters as well, as you'll see there. I didn't want to leave them black. I always wanted to have some color in there. And, I had a lot of colors to play with. So occasionally the wind and the rain would speak up and make me stop and take a rest. And I'm glad I did, because sometimes it's good to take a step back and then go right back into the process, especially when I get into these little details, because you can get lost in the details. Funny story, that last image, super quick, I know. Oh, first off, look at the Ed. This was how it all started, was with the Ed. And yeah, so dreamy. Funny story though, there was these blue heron nest where I was painting, and they were making the most amazing but awkward sounds the whole time I was working, because I don't know if you ever heard of blue heron. Not the most beautiful sound in my opinion, but so there's like 5 or 6 of them screaming, because the eagle would dive in and try to scoop them up, and he did in some cases. And I think it dropped one near the highway, which one of the guys that worked there and myself saw. I ran across the highway trying to save this blue heron from going on the Trans-Canada. And he's calling Fish and Wildlife. Someone eventually came and helped save this poor little bird. But anyway, this is the true story, by the way. This is the end part of the mural where I decided to put the kind of very simplistic Swiss flag in there. Here we go. Today gonna get this filled in red and turn it into flannel. It's the right thing to do. It's Canadian. It's BC. It's gives it that Canadiana. And there's Edelweiss looking up again. Super cool. I stayed in that house, man. So I got to stay in these places and feel them, and knowing these families lived there. Okay, so that's a pretty unique experience. I will never forget. just amazing. I think I had some really good dreams in those houses too. Because when I first went there, I actually thought maybe there would be ghosts there because they're so old. And I was like, really? And then that's the funny thing, because I heard the blue herons the first night I went there, but I didn't clue in it was blue herons and their babies making these like, ha, like the most weird sound. And so I was freaked out. I thought there was like these ghosts in the forest or a big bear or something was out there, right? So I was like, initially when I stayed there the first night, I was quite freaked out. And then as it turned out, I ended up staying with some of the guys that were working on the houses, fixing them up, who ended up being stellar human beings. And, I was a little bit nervous initially because I'm like, I usually work solo. It's like, that's my thing. And then I had to stay with these people, and they ended up being such cool individuals who were, very much crucial to me doing a good job on this mural. I'm just going to say that because it's the people you surround yourself with that make anything great. So that to me is why this thing worked out the way it did. And those are things that you have to learn, I think, through experience. No one's going to, even listening to me say this, you have to experience these things to know, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And 2 months later. Myself heading back to the Edelweiss Mural after taking some time off upon completion. I'm going to head back and just have a look at the wall and just go over some of the letters with you. Here's the wall, perhaps the longest mural I've painted to date, definitely not the tallest. And where it all began with the Ed. On the E, you have the Swiss mountain guide Christian Hessler and Joan Oliver observing Mount Assiniboine, the Canadian Matterhorn. And then on the D, the Switzerland travel patch design. On to the E, the flag of the Swiss canton Bern, where the Swiss guides and their families originally came from. On to the L, I went with a stylized sweater pattern with the Swiss Army corkscrew, a little homage to the Swiss Army knife with a little Swiss emblem on there, if it wasn't Swiss enough already. And then on to the W. This was always going to be an unknown until I got to it, except for the mountain goats on top. And I needed, first of all, a background because I decided to put a scene on it that's going to have the mountain in the background. So I looked across the valley. And lo and behold, there's Kicking Horse Ski Resort. So I did some spray paint, plein air painting. And then on the foreground, I ended up going with an apparition of Edward Foyts Jr. or Edward Fuse Jr. standing on a rock precipice with Kicking Horse in the background. And I then went with the mountain goats on top because mountain goats are amazing. And just fit that space really well in the design. I had planned to do that. So I was really happy with how the mama and the little baby. So super cool. And then on to the E. This actually came at the Ethos Coffee Shop in Golden. Great donuts, great coffee, great food. Go check it out. I met a couple there who were actual locals of Golden. the one fellow actually born in Golden who works for CP Rail, and we were chatting about the fact I did not want to paint a train in this mural, as there was already a mural with that depiction. So we talked about how the Swiss guides would have helped CP Rail do some surveying, and this included both leading them, through the mountains and perhaps even also doing some of the surveying. So there you have a Swiss guide looking through the survey instrument with the 1913 beaver logo on top. And then next to that, you have the eye with the Edelweiss flower, big fuzzy flower, looks like it belongs on the moon. And then on top of that, I went with the Edelweiss, the modern logo, kind of has a seed of life look to it. And then on to the S's. The one S, first S, was going to always be about shredding. So I ended up going with the snowboarder and the skier. I actually did a little posing for the snowboarder in my studio just to get the right shot for that and have a good image to work with. Sometimes as an artist, this is what you have to do. And then the next S is a pin that the Swiss guides would have worn. It's got the mountain goat climbing axes on it, ropes. You can see them wearing it in the pictures from back in the day in the early 1900s. And then the rest of the mural was going to be the flags of Switzerland and good old Canadian BC flannel just to finish it off. So this mural went extraordinarily well. I met so many cool people while I was working on it that contributed, like the E, even the W, passerbyers, people, locals commenting on it as I was working on it. The burn flag on the E there, that was talking to the Edelweiss people about showing the flag to represent where the families came from Switzerland. The E really set the tone, the first E with the Swiss mountain guide and Mount Assiniboine in the background. Obviously, I put the eagle in there too because I love eagles. There was always eagles soaring around me as I was working. The D, travel patch, making it look like thread, just making it textured, coming up with ways to do that. Just had a lot of fun painting this mural overall. It was a really great experience. So I just have a little write-up I'm going to read. The Edelweiss mural honors the Swiss guides who were invited by CPR to Golden B.C. to help develop tourism during the turn of the 20th century. Their efforts helped shape the Alpine experience in the Canadian Rockies. In creating the mural, I aim to step into their shoes, a challenging yet inspiring task in such a breathtaking location. Each letter tells part of their story and reflects the spirit of Golden B.C. Whether it was the trains I saw along my commute or the surrounding landscape and wildlife, the inspiration was abundant. The people I encountered during its creation made the experience extra special. Their interactions were a true testament to the community spirit you'll find in Edelweiss Village and Golden B.C. On that note, I definitely want to thank Edelweiss Village. I'd like to thank Devin, Trey, Cruz, everyone involved there who was part of that experience. The locals, all the people from around the world that just showed up staying in these places, some of them from Switzerland, Germany, Florida. Just so many different people stopped to chat. That was really amazing. Super grateful for that. And I definitely, aspire to make murals to raise the vibrations or to kind of honor something or just, really add something positive to the world. So on that note, this is links to my website, QR code, and to my Instagram. My website is www.haltzart.com. Haltz Art is committed to crafting transformative artwork that leaves a lasting impact on clients and communities in British Columbia and beyond. Specializing in commissioned art forms like murals and paintings, Haltz breathes life into creative visions through a multidisciplinary approach. His work aspires to elevate private and public spaces, inspiring viewers to feel a deeper sense of belonging and engagement. Reach out today to see how Shane Haltman can illuminate your vision. And on my website, you can also see some of my past work, learn a little bit more about me. You can contact me on my contact page. Great way to get a hold of me if you would like to hire me for a job or have a custom artwork in mind. And, I also put up these videos on there. So there's always a kind of a most current project type thing going on. So you can see what I've been up to. So just thank you so much if you made it this far. I really appreciate it. This was a very unique experience to be able to work on this project. I got to stay in these homes that the Swiss guides actually lived in. So if you ever have the chance, get yourself to Golden. Go check out Edelweiss Swiss Village Resort. You will not regret it. You will love it, in fact, either just to visit or even to stay there. So thank you very much, and I'll see you on the next mural. And aloha from the heart. Thank you. Merci. Gracias. And bonsoir.